Hello, my name is Kate Chesterman. I'm a GP in South Norfolk, and I also co-host the GPnotebook education study groups. Welcome to GPnotebook podcasts, where we present bite-sized topics aimed at all those working in primary care. You can find us on all major podcast channels, including Spotify, Apple, and Google. You can follow us on Twitter at GPnotebook, or you can follow me personally at Chesterman Kate for more information about our new podcasts and study groups as they become available. Please do visit GPnotebookpodcast.com for show notes, references, and resources for all our podcasts. Now today, I'm going to be discussing some of the ways we can support young people with mental health concerns. I'm probably not alone in feeling that I'm seeing an increasing number of young people with anxiety and depression. And while I don't dislike these consultations at all, I have this background concern throughout the consultation of what am I going to be able to offer this young person and how can I support them? I often find that even if the young person meets the threshold for being accepted by the mental health service, there are often long waits to be seen. And the majority of NHS counselling services are sadly also overrun. And this can be difficult when that young person and their family need help and support now. So I was delighted to be introduced recently to Dr. Dave Ledward, who joins me today. Dave is a GP in Norfolk who has always been interested in mental health. He's currently undertaking a postgraduate diploma in counselling and psychotherapy at the University of East London. A few years ago, Dave started a fascinating project giving talks for parents who had children in distress. And then during COVID, he was asked to produce a video of this talk so that it could go online. The video has been published on the Just One Norfolk website, which is a website developed locally to myself and Dave that is dedicated to health advice and support for children. I'll put a link to this video in the show notes for this podcast. Now, to me, this video was an important reminder that often the best people to be able to help that young person are the ones that are sat next to them in the consultation, the ones that have taken the time and care to bring their child to see you and seek help. And when parents are saying, we can't cope and we don't know what to do anymore, then maybe giving them the tools to support their child might be just what that young person needs. So Dave has very kindly agreed to join me today to discuss some of his top tips for parents and some strategies for professionals such as ourselves who are caring for young people in distress. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you.
So I wondered if you would mind just starting by telling us a little bit about this amazing project of giving talks to parents. So how did that come about, and is it something that you found a positive experience?
Yes, so there's sort of personal and professional reasons why I started. The personal reasons were that I realised that I was much better with patients and children in the surgery than I was with my own children. And I recognised that that was because I had a strong emotional reaction with my own children, and would then try and solve my children's emotional difficulties and get rid of them and make them better. And I found that was very ineffective. And I realised then that the parents of these children who come to see me must also have a strong emotional reaction to their children's distress. And also our colleagues are also, when I speak to colleagues, they also have emotional difficulties when they see mental health on their list. And so I felt it was important to try and educate people on the fact that we have to recognise our own feelings, and the parents recognise their feelings before we engage in trying to help our loved ones. A bit like the analogy of taking the oxygen mask from the aeroplane first before you attend to somebody else. Personally, what happened with me was that my daughter was having difficulties at school when she was about 7 or 8, and I would try and sort of advise her what to say, what to do, don't do this, don't do that, and she would just carry on crying and being distressed. And one day I came back after a very busy day, and she was really upset, and I was just on my own with her, and I was exhausted, and so I just, rather than engaging in talking to her, I just listened to her and just felt for her and just said, oh gosh, that sounds so difficult, and I'm so sorry that's happening. And just by me acknowledging, listening, understanding. She just stopped crying and then changed the subject, and we wanted to play with, play in the garden or something. So I just thought, blimey, maybe this is simpler than I think. And then, professionally, obviously we all know there's enormously long waits. But, so I've had children who were off school for up to a year. The parents were coming in highly distressed. And so I just thought, I really must try and teach these parents something, because that's the only people that the children have got while they're off school. And so I started talks which were really positive and well received. Partly the content of the talk, I hope, but I think largely because the parents were meeting each other and having mutual support. But in COVID, that stopped, obviously. So I did it online and then did a little video. So that's how it all came about.
That's fantastic. And thank you for sharing your personal experience as well as to why these things work. And I think it's lovely, as you say, that the parents were getting to do this with other parents as well. I think that shared experience is often really valuable.
That's right. Yeah, because the parents are often judging themselves, and other people will be doing it better. I'm not a good parent, which is an emotional reaction to the problem, isn't it? And
absolutely. And coming back to that emotional problem and our emotional response to it, which is so strong, isn't it, with our own children? Yeah. So I presume it can be helpful for families to try and understand emotions a little bit better, and maybe understand why their young person has certain thought processes.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you'd be able to explain a little bit about the language you use when explaining emotions to patients, or to parents.
So the first thing I try and get across is this idea that there's no such thing as a wrong emotion, which is quite a hard thing for some people to sort of hear and take in. But that is what I'm saying. There is no such thing as a wrong emotion. The emotions are honest messengers, and they're deeply trying to help us. They have our interest at heart. The emotion may arise from a wrong interpretation, or it may produce a wrong behaviour. So if I'm angry, it's not appropriate for me to hit somebody, but the anger that I'm feeling is okay. It is appropriate to feel that, and I may interpret a shadow as a dangerous person coming to attack me, and that may produce anxiety, and that interpretation may be wrong, but the anxiety I feel is correct. So we mustn't blame or see our emotions as foes. We must see our emotion as friends, and so our whole approach to the emotion then changes. I sort of also try and explain that, we need all emotions to have our rich human experience. There's no happiness without sadness, and there's no fear without calm. There's no such thing as a good emotion, and there's no such thing as a bad emotion. Emotions are just emotions. In the Western world, we do tend to see emotions as good, like happiness is good, sadness is bad. And if you imagine that, then it produces a sort of saw shape of emotions. And the reason saws are effective as tools is because there is the dip as well as the pointy bit. So we need both in order to function. The Eastern philosophy is very different. It's just one big, long emotional journey. They see it as a straight line as opposed to up and down, which is a bit more helpful. And emotions are a bit like the sea. We're sort of on a sea of experiences, and sometimes the sea's calm, sometimes the sea's rough, but it is always changing. They're never permanent. So I kind of just explain that all emotions are necessary. All emotions are, trying their best, and to try and get comfortable feeling the emotion as opposed to solving the emotion and not seeing it as a problem, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I can imagine if we try and solve emotions, then that's probably not a very helpful way forward. Yeah. As you say, they're things to be felt, aren't they?
Yeah, and expressed, actually. So another analogy I give is laughter, So I'm a pretty funny guy. But if I said something funny to you, you might laugh. You probably wouldn't. But you pretty much know that you're not going to laugh all day and all week. You know that, you're going to express it and it'll calm down again. Whereas when you're in a church and it's a funeral and somebody starts to make you giggle and you try and suppress that, that is the most difficult thing. And, and you've never wanted to laugh so much because you're trying to suppress something that is just wanting to be expressed. So
you would need to allow it out, to allow that emotion then to ride its course and to come down the other side of that saw again.
Yeah, to be brave enough to accept it in a sense, Yeah, which comes on to management, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely. That was going to be my next question. So I guess having that understanding of where that emotion comes from and maybe not why you're feeling that way, but accepting that emotion for what it is.
Yeah.
How can we then try and manage it so it doesn't escalate and become unhelpful and distressing?
And I think that's when we start to run into problems at that point, when we see, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I don't want to feel this way. I need to control this. I need to get rid of it. I need to ignore it. I need to have some positive thinking. And even the Western world and medicine tells us that we shouldn't be feeling this. And it's pathology even. It's like dis-ease to feel certain emotions, which I think is extremely unhelpful in the way we think about them. And the short answer is to accept them. But that, again, is quite difficult for our brains to hear, because it's, I think people quickly jump to the idea that we have to resign ourselves to them, and it's not the same. So it's not resignation. Oh, I am feeling anxious and I will always feel anxious and there's nothing I can do about it. It's not that. It's just accepting that my reality at this moment is these sensations in my body. And if you think about the sensations and actually you really hone in on what does it feel like to feel this, it's really, it's very non-threatening. Actually, it's unpleasant. Anxiety, for example, is an unpleasant emotion, but it's tolerable in the moment. Where is it? Is it in my hand? Is it in my arms? It's probably my chest or my stomach. I'm feeling it a bit now in this podcast, But if I actually sort of go into it as opposed to trying to control it, it's kind of, it's like a heaviness or a tightness, and people will have different descriptions, but it's just about accepting the feeling and not resisting it. And I do give parents many different metaphors for this idea of acceptance to try and just nail it down a bit. And so one of them is being stuck in the mud. If you imagine if you're stuck in the mud and you try and fight against it, the more you fight, the deeper you get. There's the postman analogy is like a postman is there to deliver a message and he has to get his little signature. And if you don't sign it, he won't go away. So if initially he knocks very lightly on the door, you just have a little feeling. And then if you don't answer the door, he'll just keep knocking and get louder and louder and louder. But he will deliver his message. So you may as well just open the door initially and just accept that's how you're feeling. There's lots of sort of Eastern ideas about be like water from Taoism. And, there's strength in weakness. If you imagine the Grand Canyon, water's just gone through that and sort of softness has worn down hardness. Babies, when they're born, are soft and supple. And when we die, we're hard and rigid. And the same with plants and bamboo, it blows in the wind. So the idea is that softness and yielding are companions of life, and hardness and rigidity are the companions of death. So to try and soften yourself towards it. There's many songs like Let It Be by the Beatles. When you find yourself in times of trouble, let it be. And Jessie J, I don't know whether it's okay not to be okay. Just these ideas. And with resistance, if you imagine a hook is in your arm, if you try and pull against the hook, it just gets deeper.
Yeah.
And the other things are, I say about swimming against the current. If you fall into a river and you try and swim against the current, you exhaust yourself. Whereas if you just let the current take you, and you will get to a place of safety. Another one I like is, because my wife's just got on the plane today actually, and she got a fear of flying. And I also find myself, when the plane's taken off, gripping the seats of the aeroplane, and I think, what on earth am I doing? Like, what purpose does this serve? There's really no point in resisting this, and it's not going to help the situation. So it's just about letting go, softening, being brave enough to feel, really. That's kind of it.
And I love these metaphors. I think they're a really good way of getting parents and probably young people as well to understand their emotions. And it's interesting that you say, as you say, they're in Beatles songs, they're in wisdom that's years ago. This is not necessarily new things, but things that we need reminding of maybe in Western culture.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's also very interesting that you're saying these are emotions that are for the moment. And I expect that for some people, why it can be distressing is because they have that belief that they're going to carry on feeling like that.
Yeah.
And rather than just accepting this is how they feel right now and that things will improve.
That's right. I think that's when the idea of the difference between a problem and a feeling.
Yeah.
So emotions are feelings to be felt and not problems to be solved. because the way our brain works is, well, I suppose going back a little bit, like, why do we have to accept it? How does it help? By accepting it, essentially you calm down your emotional brain. So you switch it off just by accepting it. So you're telling your emotional brain it's okay, and our rational brain can then be switched on. And then that sort of things with perspective and logic and truth and things. And so when we see the thing is, when we see an emotion as a problem, we use our sort of problem solving brain, which is incredibly helpful for society and has produced many wonderful inventions. But what happens when we see a problem is we use past experience. Why has this happened? What's gone wrong? And then we sort of get an answer to that, and then design an outcome or an intervention that will give a positive outcome. And if this doesn't happen, what will happen then? So if I do, say my emotion of anxiety is a problem, why am I anxious? I ask my anxious brain why I'm anxious. It will come up with an anxious answer. And what's the prediction? Well, I can't live like this. I can't cope with this. I can't. So actually, that's why acceptance is helpful, because you shut out the need to solve, essentially. And the other reason acceptance is helpful, or feeling the feeling, is because the emotional feelings that we have, when you actually think about them. So if we think about anxiety, and I described how I felt my anxiety was, but if you ask me, how does excitement feel? And people come up with almost exactly the same words. So the feeling of excitement, physically, the experience of it is very similar to the feeling of anxiety. And it all depends on the context where that happens. And so by accepting what's happening to you in this moment, you remove the context. So just to elaborate on that. So if I sort of like just brush past my child and then knock my child by accident, if the child turns around and sees me smiling, they'll know that was an accident, or I was a bit playful, and that sensation that they feel will be interpreted in the context that we're just having a good time. Whereas if I brush past and knock the child and they see me angry and they look at my face, they'll start crying, because their interpretation of those same physical sensations will be very different. So you remove the context by coming into the feeling in that moment and just experiencing what you're feeling, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And you mentioned the problems with problem solving, and I think as parents, it's probably something we've all tried to do when our children are emotional, and I imagine that's a common trap for parents to fall into.
Yes.
Are there other traps that are easy to fall into, things that maybe we do out of love and because we think it's the best for our children, but actually maybe aren't so helpful for them?
Yeah, so there's a number of traps, and I've fallen into all of them.
I'm sure we all have.
So one of them is we question. So if someone is depressed or anxious, we sort of say, why, what's the problem? Why are you like that? And of course we know why people are doing that, because we want to know the answer so we can solve the problem. The problem with that is that depressed patients especially ruminate why all the time. And if you asked a depressed Google, why am I depressed? The answer will be because there's something wrong with you, because no one likes you. It's, there's something defective with you. So that questioning the feeling just is unhelpful and leads the person to feel even worse, and sort of makes them think that there definitely must be something wrong with me. Sometimes we try and rationalize with children, so if an example of that would be if the child falls over and gets hurt, and I say, oh, don't worry about it, and there's a girl down the road, she's lost her leg, it's not that bad. You kind of predict that's not really going to help. But we do sometimes say to people, don't worry, it's not that bad, and other people are worse off, trying to help, trying to sort of give them some positive take on it. But it just doesn't help, and it makes them feel guilty for feeling that way. So rationalization doesn't help. Offering solutions, again, is wanting to help. So we say, oh, when I felt like that, I did this, or why don't you make a cake, or why don't you go for a bike ride? And those things may be helpful and may be good advice, but actually when you've got an emotional difficulty, you don't really want that, and you kind of know that would help actually deep down. But there's a reason you're not doing it, because you're so distressed. So it's about sort of just letting the person be in the space they're at that moment, and try and resist the temptation to offer a solution, which may be a valid solution. But other things we do, we we sometimes get angry with them because we feel distress when we see our child distressed. And so, and it's really hard to tolerate our own distress. And so we want to get rid of it. And one way to get rid of it is to get rid of theirs. And so we sort of, you can't keep behaving like this. And then, you've got to buck your ideas up, and it's affecting all of us, don't you? And so we do that, which isn't helpful. We sometimes avoid it. So rather than actually, we know our child's upset, but we don't want to go there again because we didn't work last time. So we just pretend it's not happening, and they can see that, and that's deeply hurtful to a child to see that that you're not approaching them when they're distressed, almost like it's not acceptable for you to feel that, which is devastating, I think.
Yeah.
We also overprotection sometimes, so we sort of do things for them. No, don't do that. You've got an anxiety problem. You go out. You don't need to do that. I'll do it for you. Which again is because you love them, but it kind of one of the things that has been shown to improve mental health is autonomy, self-direction, and self-motivation. And so if you remove that, you're kind of removing a lot of what makes us feel good about ourselves. So it's kind of resist that as well.
Yeah. So as you say, a lot of these kind of responses can result in that person feeling worse, feeling guilty about how they're feeling, or bad for how they're feeling, when actually what we're trying to teach them to do is accept how they're feeling.
To contain the emotion,
Yeah, rather than riding it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's really helpful. So I guess knowing and being able to advise parents what not to say and do, are there some top tips on things that we can be asking them to do, suggesting that they do with their children to try and help them?
Yeah, I think that. I think the main thing is not. If you imagine infants, when infants they're born, they've got all these emotions riding around, and we instinctively just know to pick them up. And what happens in perfect parenting is that child sort of dissipates his emotional distress to the mother usually, and the mother can contain that and then hand it back in a smaller or calmer form. And so the child learns self-regulation because the mother's regulating the emotions for the child, and that's all pre-verbal. So there's no words involved. And so actually, Ronan Keating said, you say it best when you say nothing at all. So actually, if in doubt, don't say anything. Just it's more to be with the person. But I think phrases like, I'm here to listen. It's is there anything I can do to help? You have the right to feel this way, I think is really important to say. I don't know, I can't imagine what you're going through, but I'm here to listen. Just those sort of things, really. But on the whole, it's more showing them that you're willing to be in their presence, and with small children, that you are overjoyed to be in their presence. Everything is acceptable. But in the Western world, what we tend to do is, we're advised to have timeouts and don't go to the baby when it's crying. Even that we're told these things, but actually, it's almost like telling people when you're at your most distressed, I will be the least available. And actually, so we have to be brave enough to tolerate and seeing our loved one distressed and feeling confident that it's okay to feel that way. It's okay not to like it. But it really is okay and safe to have those feelings in that moment, And
so being there for them and just saying that it's okay to feel like this and allowing them to feel like that. And,
allowing it,
and as you say, that must be quite difficult for parents. And personally speaking, as a parent, I know it is. It does cause that emotional distress. So I guess talking to the parents about looking after themselves.
That's right.
Is really important.
So everything we've been saying here is for the parents as well, to know that they are okay to have their emotional distress and to feel their emotions and not to try and, not beat themselves up and become very self-critical, just to, be compassionate towards themselves, because compassion also calms the emotional brain down. It's super helpful. So you really need to, we really need to stop criticizing ourselves and
having a
being real
to ourselves and our young people.
Feeling what we're feeling and being open to that, and not feeling that we shouldn't be this way, we should be a different way. It's like, then probably Instagram and social media probably fuels all that idea, doesn't it?
Exactly, it does. Yeah. And I think one of the most frightening things for parents must be when their young person is talking about or having thoughts about harming themselves. I think that real crisis situation must be very difficult. Do you have any tips for what parents can do in that situation?
I think just not being afraid of it, because again, it's just another emotion being expressed in a, I can't bear this so much that I actually want to get away. It's escape, isn't it? I want to escape, the ultimate escape. And knowing just how very painful or painful position for that person to be in, and just to have compassion for that person, and if for the parent, just to just to allow the person to express themselves and just to be there, and similar sort of things. You have the right to feel that way. Is there anything I can do to help? Which may be getting a doctor's appointment, or showing that it matters to you that they're feeling that way, and that you want to try and help them. But for you to try and keep it as simple for the parents, it's mainly just about being there, being available, not shying away from it, but not being afraid of it either, because they're just saying they're distressed, essentially. So, yeah.
The extreme end of distress, isn't it? And as you say, being there until they feel safe again. And
yeah, that's right.
Important.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about supporting and advising families, which, as we said, I think is hugely important. I think parents and families are probably a very valuable and underused resource. So I'm sure I've been guilty when parents have come saying they don't know what to do, of looking elsewhere for solutions rather than empowering them to help. But I wondered if you'd mind just spending a few minutes talking a little bit about some of your strategies for us as professionals to use when we've got those families, those young people in front of us.
So the way I sort of deal with it, the first bit is all the sort of listening, acknowledging, understanding the parents. So just really saying how very difficult for you, and this must be so difficult for you. And when you do that, parents will just start crying. They will express it and encouraging them and saying you're the best person for the job. You were born for this, or they were born for this. And then but once I've done that bit, which actually is hugely helpful and gets the child and hopefully the parent into what's called a window of tolerance. Have you heard of the window of tolerance? So window of tolerance is where we are rational, our emotional brain is on, and we can think clearly. When we get distressed, we can go into what's called hyper-arousal, which is sort of like the fight and flight response. And so we get anxious and heart racing, and our breathing goes shallow. Or we can get hypo-aroused when you actually sort of freeze, the freeze response, and sort of dissociation, feeling that you're a bit distant from yourself, and lethargic and lacking motivation. And so those both emotional brain states. And so if you calm the emotional brain down, you get into what's called the window of tolerance. When they're there, then you can suggest things and remind them of things. And the two things that I say to the people to try and keep it as simple as possible, I talk about thoughts and I talk about behaviors. And so I just remind them that when you feel certain types of emotions, your thinking pattern changes. So when, and that's evolutionary served as well. So when I'm feeling anxious and fearful, the people who had those emotions tend to over predict risk and underestimate their ability to cope. And so if I was in a cave and there's a village who's attacking me, it's probably quite good that I overestimate the risk of that village attacking me, so that I will stay up all night, not sleep, and be ready for their attack. And I underestimate my ability to cope. And when you're depressed, you tend to sort of have negative memories, negative interpretations, negative predictions. So the point is that strong emotion produces unhelpful, sort of childlike, chimp-like, primitive type thinking, and it's a trap we all fall into every time. But if I sort of try and point out to the child and the mother or the father that, when I feel like this, I always tend to think like that. That's the way I think. I must do that. Don't take my thoughts too seriously if I have strong emotion around, so, and always coming back to that, just to remind them, there's lots and lots of CBT sort mistakes, like catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, magnification. But so that's the main thing. Like when you feel like that, you will think like that. You will have that abnormal thinking. So that's number one. And the other thing is when you ask them, people who are depressed, for example, have you, what are you doing in your life at the moment? When life's going well, what do you normally do? Oh, I play football, I see my friends, I go shopping. And what are you doing now? Nothing. I just haven't got the energies to do anything. So it's kind of, and showing them that what keeps this emotion going, that the fuel to the fire of the emotion is inactivity, avoidance, or behavior changes. So I sort of try and point that out, that actually it all feeds itself. So one thing you can do, you can't change your thinking, but you can certainly change your behavior, and encourage people to try and say to themselves, what would I be doing today if I was well? If I was my best self, what would I be doing today? And that might, you might go for a 5-mile run every few days, and you might not want to do that. But if you can just maybe a sort of like a 5-minute walk, maybe I can just get out of bed, just do something that just gives you a sense of achievement, or a sense of closeness to other people, or a sense of enjoyment, things that would normally give you those feelings. Try and just force yourself to do those things in a compassionate, gentle way, not in a forcing way. But that can make a huge difference very quickly, behavior changes.
That's really helpful. And I love that idea of just that listening and the empathy first, so they're in that position to be able to then accept suggestions that you're making, and then 2 really good suggestions of things we could try. So thank you. That's really helpful. And Dave, thank you again so much for joining me. And thank you everyone for listening. I hope that you too have found this helpful. Please do feel free to get in touch via social media, or email me at kchesterman@gpnotebook.com if you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future topics.